we're gonna open the show with someone that I haven't thought about in years, to be honest. Um, but he has always been a source of a lot of antics, if you will. Mario Balotelli is back in the headlines. Roberto Mancini recalling him to the Italian squad for the upcoming World Cup qualifiers. And just for context as well, his form, it has to be said, does justify maybe the call up if you look at the pure numbers. He plays in Turkey right now and has scored 8 goals, 19 league appearances with one more goal in the Turkish Cup. But Josh, is this more a sign of desperation than a reward for good form on Italy's behalf?
Yeah, I think it's a sad indictment of where Italy's striker stocks have got to and the injuries that they've suffered. I mean, Federico Chiesa's big injury has really put a dampener on the enthusiasm and the excitement for these playoff games, because he's the guy who is kind of the game breaker. He's the guy who comes up in that one big moment and scores a goal. And, without his kind of intensity and his big game aptitude, Italy suddenly look a little bit more hollow in terms of their depth up front. I mean, Ciro Immobile scores goals for fun in Serie A, but for the Italian national team, he's never really delivered on a consistent basis. He's had chances, but maybe on the bigger stage, Immobile hasn't quite lived up to his league form. And Belotti, who I've always thought in Roberto Mancini's 4-3-3 as a target player, a guy you can play into his feet or get crosses into, is probably a better fit in the 4-3-3, but he's injured. So Italy have a real problem now, and the fact that Mancini has turned to Balotelli again after all of their bust-ups over the years, after their very tumultuous relationship, suggests to me that he's pretty desperate for an X-factor, a game-changing player off the bench. And I'm not sure bringing Mario Balotelli back from a mid-table Turkish Super League team after all these years is the answer. I think maybe they should have taken a bit more of a chance on somebody younger. And I can see in my mind's eye, in these playoff games coming up against North Macedonia, if they get through, they'll probably have to play Portugal to get to the World Cup. So it's a hard road ahead. I can just see some sort of tragic red card in the near future that might rule Italy out of a second consecutive World Cup.
And I mean, they're famous stories, right, about Mario Balotelli. I mean, the big one is obviously when he did try to do that spinning move to score that goal in that friendly for Manchester City when Mancini was in charge, and he yanked him off. But there's also that famous Jose Mourinho story during his time in Inter. At halftime, Mourinho tells him, "Look, we can't get you another card. You can't get sent off." And what does he proceed to do in the opening moments of that second half? Get a red card. But I think your point about Italy's lack of firepower since they won the Euros, apart from a 5-0 win over Lithuania, they've only scored 5 goals in 6 matches. You named a couple of big names there that are injured. Are there any names that spring to mind that maybe could have been picked ahead of Mario Balotelli?
Yeah, it's difficult. I mean, they've called up a lot of players, Italy. I still think, even though he's not playing regularly for Juventus, Moise Kean is still a better option at this point. I just think he has less risk for, a terrible mistake or a red card or, destabilizing the training ground and the dressing room or whatever. I just think there's less risk involved with a player like him in these big games. Italy don't have that many young strikers playing regularly in Serie A. Sebastiano Esposito was supposed to be the next big thing. He hasn't broken through yet. Multiple loan moves. He's out at FC Basel, I believe. He's only just started getting in the team, so maybe it's too soon for him. Pietro Pellegrini is another player who's had big raps on him, but he hasn't played for Milan. 40-year-old Zlatan Ibrahimovic is still starting ahead of him, and he's well down the pecking order behind the likes of Rebic and Rafael Leao. So I believe he's going to Torino this window, and that might be a chance for him to get some first-team football and get in the picture for the Italian squad. But yeah, the options are thin on the ground, and there's a lot of older players and foreigners. If you look at the Serie A top scorers list, the likes of Edin Dzeko are still dominating the standings, and there aren't too many local players. and seeing Lorenzo Insigne decide to go to FC Toronto instead of staying at a high level. I wonder whether come the World Cup, because his move comes at the end of this season, whether Mancini will have to be forced to stick with him, even though he would probably prefer to drop a guy who's decided to go to MLS to pick up a paycheck instead of testing himself.
And look, I'm gonna reel off the names of that squad selection of the forwards in the Italian team. All right, so you've got Balotelli, Domenico Berardi, Federico Benedeschi, Immobile, Insigne, João Pedro from Cagliari, Raspadori, Scamacca, and a couple of other names, Zaniolo. Any name stands out to you as someone they can look towards, or is it not good reading for Italian fans?
The one guy is Scamacca. I'm big on him. I mean, they've called up Berardi even though he's got an injury cloud, and I don't think he's an out-and-out striker anyway. Yep. He's more of a winger who cuts inside. A lot of those guys you mentioned are actually wingers. They're in the forward section, but they're not out-and-out number 9s. Raspadori, for example, you could put him up front, but he'd be a fish out of water. He's much better used in a more playmaking role. But Scamacca has really impressed me. He's the big hope, but you need more than one striker in this extended squad. So I can see why they've gone back to Balotelli, but I also see this as potentially ego from Roberto Mancini. He's going back to his one regret in his career, that he couldn't, hone this talent, this unbelievable talent. He couldn't fix him, and he's going back to try and maybe resurrect Mario Balotelli's career and therefore right some of the wrongs of his own managerial past. And I just want to read this quote from him. This is on the 6th of April 2012. I told him, this is Mancini speaking about Balotelli, I told him, if you played with me 10 years ago, I would give you every day maybe one punch in your head. There are different ways to help a guy like Mario. I don't speak with him every day, otherwise I would need a psychologist. If Mario is not one of the best players in the world, it will be his fault because he has everything. Mario can be one of the top players in Europe. I don't want him to lose his talent. Very soon after that, about a month later, there was that famous game against QPR where, down 2-1 with the title on the line, Mancini was at the edge of his technical area screaming at every single Man City player individually, and you can see it. It doesn't take a lip reader to see he's saying F you, F you, F you. And he throws Balotelli and Dzeko on, and Balotelli ends up setting up Aguero for the title-winning goal. But then, a year later, there's a training ground fight between the two of them, between manager and player, after Balotelli went in studs up on one of his teammates at a training session, and Mancini just completely lost his rag and eventually got rid of him. So it all ended on a sour note despite that title triumph. And Roberto Mancini, I think it's like one of your old exes that is bad for you, but you're going back to them again. It's like, I can fix him.
And look, if Italy do manage to qualify for the World Cup, you know who's bringing the fireworks. Head to Mario Balotelli's hotel room. It's going to go off there.
In the bathroom.